In the middle of the 14th century, a silent killer swept across Europe. A plague so deadly, it erased entire towns, destroyed families, and reshaped the very course of human history. They called it the Black Death. But this is not just a story of disease. It's a story of fear, faith, survival, and transformation, in an age when no one could understand what was happening. Let's journey back to medieval Europe, where death wore the mask of a blackened face, and where 1/3 of humanity met its end. Our story begins far from Europe, deep in the mountains of Central Asia. The year is 1330. In the trading towns along the Silk Road, a strange sickness begins to spread. It's caused by a bacterium named Yersinia pestis, living in the blood of fleas that infest black rats. These rats travel aboard merchant ships, spreading the invisible death along every trade route. By 1346, the plague reaches the great port city of Kaffa, on the shores of the Black Sea. When Mongol forces besieged the city, disease tore through their ranks. Legend says, they catapulted infected corpses over the walls. Terrified Genoese merchants fled, sailing home to Italy, carrying the plague with them. Europe had no idea what was coming. October 1347, the plague reaches Messina, Sicily. By the time the ships docked, most of the crew were already dead or dying. The survivors carried swollen buboes, black lumps under their arms and between their legs. Within days, the sickness spread like wildfire. It raced through Italy's crowded ports, Venice, Genoa, Florence. And from there, across all of Europe. No one was safe. Peasants, priests, kings, death didn't discriminate. Some cities tried to close their gates. Others blamed foreigners or the poor. But there was no escape. The Black Death had arrived. Those infected faced a horror beyond imagination. First came the fever, the chills, the exhaustion. Then, the buboes, black swellings the size of apples. Their skin turned dark from internal bleeding. Some coughed blood, others died in a single night. Medieval doctors were powerless. They believed the air was poisoned, miasma, they called it. They burned incense, wore strange bird-like masks stuffed with herbs, and prayed. But nothing worked. The dead piled up faster than they could be buried. In many villages, there were no priests left to give last rites. No gravediggers to bury the bodies. The living fled, leaving behind the dying. Europe had become a continent of ghosts. As death swept through towns and villages, faith began to tremble. Many saw the plague as God's punishment for human sin. People turned to desperate acts of penance. Groups of flagellants roamed from city to city, whipping themselves to earn forgiveness. Others blamed outsiders, Jews, beggars, and strangers. In 1348, terrible massacres began. Innocent communities burned alive for crimes they never committed. The church struggled to explain the suffering. Some priests stayed to comfort the sick, others abandoned their flocks and ran. Faith, once the pillar of medieval life, began to crack. By 1350, the Black Death had consumed nearly all of Europe. England, France, Spain, Germany, no kingdom was untouched. In some places, half the population was gone. Fields lay untilled. Markets were silent. Families vanished overnight. And yet, in the ashes of despair, something new was born. With so many dead, labor became valuable. Peasants began demanding higher wages, a spark that would later fuel revolts across Europe. The old world was dying, and a new one was struggling to be born. When the plague finally faded around 1353, Europe was forever changed. Entire generations had been lost. But out of the darkness, people began to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more aware of the fragility of life. Medicine began to evolve. Doctors started to question superstition and study the human body more scientifically. The feudal system weakened, paving the way for the Renaissance and a new age of thought. The Black Death had destroyed, but it had also transformed. The plague was not gone forever. It returned again and again for centuries, in London, Paris, Vienna, and Constantinople. Even as late as the 17th century, outbreaks continued to terrify Europe. But none would ever match the horror of that first wave. Historians estimate that the Black Death killed between 75 and 200 million people, nearly half of Europe's population. And yet, humanity endured. Today, the Black Death remains one of the most devastating tragedies in human history. It reminds us how fragile civilization can be, and how resilient humanity truly is. Out of death came progress. Out of fear came knowledge. And from the ashes of despair, rose a new world. The story of the medieval plague is not just a tale of suffering. It's a reminder of what we have survived. And a warning of what could return, if we ever forget the lessons of the past.